Hi, I'm Fred Hayden from Nashua Outdoor Power Equipment. 2 locations, Nashua, New Hampshire and Amherst, New Hampshire on 101A. Okay, now that we have your spark plug, your air filter, and your oil is changed, now we have to service underneath the machine. So we're on a table again, so I'm going to help TJ and I'll hold the machine. We're going to rotate the machine on its side. Spark plug is still disconnected. We have the air filter is going to be up toward the sky and the muffler down. That way we're not putting any of the fresh oil back in the air filter, excuse me. All right, let's roll it on its side. Okay. Now, if this was a mower that you'd been using, a lot of this under here is going to be covered with grass. When this gets covered with grass, you should be washing your mower out almost every time you use it. Get rid of the grass that's underneath, because the manufacturers spend a lot of time developing these decks for airflow. That's how they make them good mulchers or good baggers. But if they get grass underneath them, you've taken their $1 million of research and development and made your own deck shape underneath there. So we want to wash this out. A lot of these have washout ports, so you can put the hose on there, start the machine, and the blade will wash underneath the deck. However, you still might not get everything, so this is where we're going to take the blade off first, get that out of our way. And we have a little tool here that you can purchase. It's a blade buster. Basically, it will lock onto the deck, whether you have a rider mower or a walk-behind mower, and allow you to hold the blade in place while you're taking the nut off. If you have an electric impact or an air impact, that works easier, but it's fine by hand. A lot of the machines, first time you're taking the blade off, if it's new, they're going to be torqued on there pretty good. After it's been off the first time, it'll be no problem taking your blades on and off. So if we're going to put this little device on, want to rotate the blade till you have a clear spot in the deck. The blades, you know, depending on, they might be really sharp too, especially where this one's a new one. The blade's going to have a nice edge on it. So you want to be careful. You might want to wear gloves while you're doing this, leather gloves to protect yourself from the blade. But we're going to hold the blade in place. And remove the blade bolt. If you do this on a regular basis, if you sharpen your blade 2 or 3 times a season like you should, you'll be able to sharpen your blade at home with a simple file. With one hand, he's going to keep a firm grip on the blade, or if you put it in a vise, you know, obviously it'll be held and you can use both hands. But depending on how dull the blade is, you can take this file and just run it into the blade. Nice smooth strokes, and you can follow the angle of the blade and you'll end up with a nice sharp edge. Okay. Other methods, you can use a grinding wheel if you have a bench grinder at home. You can use a hand grinder, a die grinder. There's plenty of ways to put an edge on this blade, or bring it down to your local shop and we'll sharpen it for you. Also, depending on the condition of the blade, if we're really taking a lot of meat off, then we're going to want to balance the blade. You know, it does make a difference. If it's really off balance, it'll wear on your seals and your crankshaft. You can do it simply. You can hang it on a nail by the center hole and make sure that it's not flipping one way or the other really fast. There's cheap blade balances you can purchase, cone balances where you can set it on and make sure the weight is pretty even on the blades. But a blade in general, TJ is going to point out the airlift on the blade. If we can get down on this. This airlift, the sand will actually hit the blade and wear out the airlift. And when the airlift gets worn out, that's typically when your blade's going to wear out. It has really nothing to do with the leading edge that is where the sharpening part is. You could sharpen that all the way back, but when you lose that airlift, it thins out and a little piece of the blade can actually break off. That's one of the dangers, but the worst effect is that it'll reduce your output of grass. So if you're trying to bag, it won't bag as well. If you're trying to side discharge, it won't side discharge as well. So your airlift, you want to pay attention to the quality, the condition of the blade before you sharpen it, because it might be time to replace it anyway. But that's really all there is to the blade. So we'll set the blade down now, and now we're going to clean underneath the deck before we put it back on. We can do that with a simple paint scraper, putty knife, and we want to get all the debris out from underneath the deck. All right, get it as clean as you can. It doesn't have to be polished or waxed, but we want to take everything out from underneath that it might be hanging on the deck. All right, so once you've got that done, we can go ahead and put the blade back on. Putting the blade on, there is a torque specification in your manual. The blade should be on there fairly tight. If it's not on there tight, it'll chuck back and forth. It'll make this knocking noise, so you'll know that your blade is loose, but the other part is there's a flywheel key that can be sheared, which will set the timing of the mower off if the blade isn't tight. So it's important to get the blade tight. You'll know if it's not tight. Again, like I said, it'll make a knocking noise when you start the machine up. So good. Okay, we'll take our tool off the machine. And we're going to bring the machine back upright. Once we're done with this part, we can go ahead and reconnect the spark plug wire. Put the bagger on the machine. You know what? We're going to do one other thing. This Toro, this says, is a self-propelled, and it does have a couple of grease fittings. Depending on how, I don't know what to say, the quality of your mower, whether it has bearings or bushings, you might come upon a couple grease fittings. That'll be in your owner's manual, but if you can visually see them, you just want to make sure you put some grease. These ones happen to be right here on the rear wheels, and they just keep the axle or the adjuster lubricated, because fertilizer, this is an aluminum deck machine, and the fertilizer we put on our lawn really has a tough reaction with aluminum and steel, and will cause the parts to mate together if you don't keep things well greased. So the grease gun, we just slide on the grease nipple, pump it a couple of times. You don't want to really fire in too much grease where it's oozing out and slobbering around the parts, so you just want to pump it in and make sure it's lubricated. All right, and that is it. We check our height adjusters, make sure they're all on the same level all the way around. Put the bagger back on the machine, and then we can go about our normal starting procedure to fire it up and make sure that it runs fine. All right, I'm going to tip the mower. Actually, I'm not going to tip it that way. What I'll do is I'll turn it around so we're not getting oil in the air cleaner like I mentioned before. This is that wash port. I just wanted to show you that you can hook a normal hose to, run the hose while you start the machine, and it'll wash out underneath the deck. A lot of the new machines have that fitting on there to make it easier to wash the deck. All right, so hopefully we're giving you some good tips on getting your mower ready for spring. The only other thing we want to tell you is, when you do put it away in the fall, we would suggest running it out of gas, leaving it without fuel in it for the winter time, because the gas is going to go stagnant anyway. So, happy mowing.